So good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here for several reasons. And the first one is it's my first time speaking in Italy, and it's an amazing place to be speaking. Walking in the streets of Bologna the past days, I was just amazed by the beauty and the culture, and reminded me how much Western culture owe to Italy. Here in Bologna, obviously, the very cradle of Western academia, and Italian Renaissance, and so on and so forth. I mean, Italy has been such an important contributor to what really shapes Western identity and culture. So it's a very great honor to be speaking here. The second reason is that I love speaking to teachers, because I believe that truly, and I'm not saying that to flatter you, but because I really believe it, teachers are the most important people in society, because you hold tomorrow's society in your heads, in your hearts, and in your hands. So really, to be speaking to teachers is what I love most. And thirdly, there would be more, but I'll stick with 3 reasons. I was so inspired by yesterday's presentations, and I resonated so strongly with everything that had been said and everything we heard, everything we did, from the importance of relationships to social love, over the importance of music. And I mean, I could spend my whole talk just sharing what I loved about yesterday. But you've heard it too, so it's no point doing it. And actually, it creates a little bit of a problem for me, because I prepared my presentation, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and I didn't know what would be presented. If I had known, and if I would have prepared my presentation yesterday evening, it would have been a bit different. But we'll do with what we have. And so anyway, the slides you will get, they will be published, but I will not stick very strictly to the slides, because I really want to speak from my heart to you, not just following slides. And our ideas, our values, our beliefs are shaped by our biography. And therefore, I would like to share just a few short aspects of my biography. Don't worry, if an old man starts saying I'm going to speak about my life, people get worried, especially the next speakers, because they think, okay, so we're done. So I'll do my best to keep it brief. But 2 aspects I would like to share, because they are directly connected with the educational project I want to speak about. The first one, although I'm here to speak about Buthan and the gross national happiness, actually, my father was from Vietnam. And my life has been shaped by Vietnam War, because I'm of the generation of the war. And I had the opportunity, together with my wife, to come back to Vietnam shortly after the war. And I witnessed the destruction, the suffering, especially the suffering of the children. And so that was the beginning of a work that we started many, many years ago, and that led to the development specifically of special education, because we witnessed so many children who had been victims of the war, direct or indirect victim. So that's why we started our work with special education. And working in the field of special education was very interesting, because you cannot stick to the normal academic curriculum, purely intellectual dimension. You have to find other ways. So that is one background. That my quest for happiness was not a superficial feel-good quest, sort of everybody's happy, everybody's smiling, sort of new agey utopia, but it was really based on the question, how can we transform suffering? And seeing happiness as the power to transform suffering. And we heard yesterday about transformation of trauma. So these are things that were very close to my heart. Then the second thing is I worked for many years with the International Committee of the Red Cross, which is the part of the Red Cross that works in war zones and conflict areas. So again, war has been an important part of my life. And witnessing a lot of conflicts, destruction in the world, of course, what we were doing as humanitarian worker was very useful, very positive, very good, but it left a trace of it's not enough. Because a lot of the suffering is related with people, inflicting people on others, right, in wars. But behind that, there is structural violence, systemic violence. And in the end, those who inflict the suffering are just pawns in a bigger game. They are not really the one at the root cause of the war. These young people fighting and they are not the problem in the end. And so that really led me to ask myself, would there be a way, do systems have to be so destructive? Would it be possible to have systems, economic systems, social systems, political systems, educational systems that promote peace, well-being, rather than exploitation and violence? And that's how I got interested in gross national happiness. So, to make it very brief, the story of gross national happiness has to do with a vision from a young king. When the king of Buthan came up with this vision, he was 17 years old. So you see, there's a wisdom of age, hopefully, because I'm old, I hope there's a wisdom of age, but there's a wisdom of youth. And that was an outcome of vision of the wisdom of youth. And he asked himself, when he was 17 when he ascended the throne, his fathers died. At that time, it was still an absolute monarchy. And he asked himself, what shall I do for my people? And he did something extraordinary that more leaders should do. He went around the country and listened. Usually we think of leaders as those who say, but he understood the leader is the one who can listen. And he listened to his people. And when he came back, he tried to summarize what he has heard. And he said it's difficult because many people want many different things. But what everybody wants is to be happy, their loved ones to be happy, to be free of suffering as much as possible, their loved ones to be free of suffering as much as possible. And so he said, the vision of my reign will be enhancing happiness. And at one point, a journalist asked him, yeah, but, what's the GDP of your country anyway? Bhutan is a very small country, so the GDP of Bhutan is probably less than the GDP of Bologna City, right? And the king answered this, gross national happiness is more important than gross national product or gross domestic product. It's very simple, but it's very deep. It reminds us that, of course, economic growth is important. Of course, development is important. But it's not the goal. The goal is to enhance the well-being of the people. The goal is to enhance the quality of life of the people. Economy is there to serve the people, not the people to serve the economy. Therefore, gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product or gross national product. That was, in a nutshell, the insight, the intuition or inspiration that he had. Now, the question was, okay, that's a nice idea, but what do you do with that? So I would like you to listen to, that was my boss in Bhutan, he was the Prime Minister of Bhutan, has to say about it.
GNH, or Gross National Happiness, is the philosophy that had guided Bhutan's development process for about now 40 years. It is based on the belief that development must serve a purpose, that development's role is not simply to promote continuous and limitless economic growth, which is what GDP or the conventional economic models tend to do. And that again, within a finite environment, within a finite world, there are bounds within which growth can take place. natural, social, resources, and so forth. And so G&H is based on the belief that development must be human-centered and that its objective must be to create those conditions that will enable the human individual to achieve what is most important to him. And that happens to be happiness. And then again, happiness, we believe, is a condition that can be attained when one is able to balance the needs of the body with those of the mind, the physical and the mental needs being balanced. And likewise, the balance between the spiritual needs of the human individual and the material needs. And so it is a human-centered, holistic, sustainable, and inclusive development approach. Now more and more people who are dissatisfied with the result of pursuing an economic development that is no longer seen to be sustainable, they are seeing G&H as an alternative development paradigm.
Thank you. So that's in a nutshell the idea of gross national happiness. And now one of the three questions were, so we presented that at the UN in 2011. A resolution was adopted, happiness and well-being as a new development paradigm. And the then Secretary General of the UN asked the royal government of Bhutan to convene what they called a high-level meeting in New York at the UN in 2012 to reflect, so how can we implement that? It's a nice idea, but how do we implement that? And so three questions came up. The first one is, when you speak of gross national happiness, what do you mean by happiness? Everybody has another definition, so what do you mean by happiness? Second, can we measure happiness? I mean, we know we can measure economic growth, GDP, it's a very clear indicator system, measurement system, but happiness, can we measure happiness? Does it make sense at all? And thirdly, if so, can happiness be learned? Otherwise, how can you develop it if you cannot be learned? So these were the three questions. What is happiness? Can you measure it? Can it be learned? And so we tried to answer these three questions. So we had a very interesting meeting at Earth Institute of Columbia University where we invited over 100 worldwide experts to reflect together what is happiness from a interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary perspective, not only psychology, not only sociology, not only economics, but all of that together. And we tried then to summarize the outcome of all these researchers in a way that would be simple enough to memorize, to share. And we came up with a simple definition, which was happiness has to do with three main factors. The first one is learning how to care for oneself and to live in harmony with oneself. So it's about self-care, self-knowledge, self-transformation. Nothing new. All the wisdom tradition of the world have pointed out of the importance of self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is the key to self-transformation. So that's the first point. The second one is learning to care for and to live in harmony with others. And we've heard yesterday very convincingly about the importance of relationship. The quality of relationship matters in schools, in families, at work, in society. Are we able to create caring, loving relationship, friendship, empathy, compassion? And we know from experience and from research that this determines to a large extent of our own well-being, the quality of human relationship. And thirdly, and most importantly in our time, caring for and living in harmony with nature and the planet. Given the ecological challenges that we are facing, obviously, if we as a humankind do not learn how to live in harmony with all living beings, with our planet, with the elements, with nature, there will be obviously no happiness because no future. So these were the three key elements that we try to summarize as what do we mean by happiness? Not a superficial, hedonistic, pleasure-oriented, everybody is always smiling and laughing, but really something that is more a deeper level of understanding what true happiness is about. So the second question was, can you measure it? And so we came up with, again, a lot of research. A group of about 80 experts worked together for over a year to come up with 9 domains, 33 indicators, and over 150 variables. I will not go into the technicality of it. But to say, well, we cannot measure happiness as such, but we can measure the elements that are proven to contribute to people flourishing and well-being, including culture, education, environment, psychological well-being, health, living standard, community vitality, good governance, time use, and so on. So 9 domains. And these are measured every 3 or 4 years in Bhutan to measure the development of the country. But you can also use these indicators to measure a school, a business, an organization. And a very important breakthrough came not that long ago. When was it? 2 years ago, when we met with Andreas Schleicher, who will be speaking today, the director of the PISA study, who generously invited us to contribute to the idea, how could we transform these national indicators to apply them to schools? And the outcome was the PISA Happy Life dashboard that measures the well-being of students. So that was the second question. Can you measure it? Yes, we can measure it, not happiness as such, but the indicators that contribute to happiness and well-being. And the third question was, can we learn it? Yes, it can be learned. And a very significant aspect, as I said, I will not go in detail into my slides, you will get them, but a very important dimension of gross national happiness, that's one of the only indicator system or framework that balances the inner dimensions and the structural, the societal dimension. You know, you have many people who are interested in the inner dimension, positive psychology, human flourishing, all these things. And then you have activists or socially engaged people who want to transform society, political action, and so on. But what's the connection between the two? Between the inner dimension and the social dimension? And that's a specificity of gross national happiness, that it focuses on the relationship between inner development, inner transformation, and social transformation. Because the core idea is the systems are not God-given. The systems are not natural laws. The systems are the manifestation of the way we human beings think, feel, act, relate to one another, relate to ourselves, relate to nature. So if we want to change the systems in a sustainable way, we have to change our own consciousness. And I don't know if you are aware of the inner development goals. You know, there are the sustainable development goals, the UN goals for 2030, sustainable, and all the countries lag behind. And when you look at why are the countries lagging behind, because the inner competencies that you need to change the behavior are not there. Therefore, the idea of inner development goals. So gross national happiness tries to balance. It's not only about looking inside. It's not only about changing society. It's about having the right balance between inner transformation and social change. And in the time of AI, obviously, for the world of education, that will be a huge transformation. And I think we can be worried about it, or we can see it as an opportunity, because it will force us to focus on what is specifically human that the machine cannot take over. And I would like to propose that there are 3 competencies or 3 dimensions that you teachers will always be the masters of, and the machine will never take over. The first one is self-knowledge-based wisdom. Self-knowledge-based wisdom. The machine can handle millions of information. Information is not yet knowledge, but now the very advanced AI processors can create knowledge. Yes, they can, but not wisdom. Wisdom is something human because it has to do with self-knowledge, which the machine will never be able to take over. So self-knowledge-based wisdom. In wisdom, there are other dimensions than knowledge. There are ethical dimensions, there are human dimensions, there are relational dimensions. The second one is empathy and compassion. The machine doesn't have any empathy. It can mimic empathy, but it cannot feel empathy. Only we human beings can feel empathy, can feel, have the intention to alleviate suffering, to bring happiness to others. That's a purely human connection. So that's a second focus as teachers, educators, parents. And the third one is compassionate action. So again, the machine only thinks in terms of rational decision-making. But compassionate action, and we heard it yesterday beautifully about social love, you go beyond what the rational would ask you to do. And this beyond, this what is added value, that's the human dimension. So wisdom, empathy, relationship, love, friendship, and compassionate actions can become the focus of our attention, because a lot of what we used to do, let's be frank, it will be taken over by machines, whether we like it or not. But it can be an opportunity. So we developed a program. So one of the tasks I had in Bhutan was working with the Ministry of Education to develop a so-called Gross National Happiness in Education program. And our motto was, happy teachers will change the world. Because you can teach math or science or language, because you know it. But happiness is not something you teach because you know it. You have to embody it, right? Social and emotional qualities are not theories. They are embodied experiences, and that's what really has an impact on your students. So if we want to have happy schools, happy students, we have to have happy teachers. And I'm aware that it can sound utopian, because teaching profession is not an easy one. We are confronted with a lot of pressure and a lot of challenges, and yet it is maybe our main responsibility to be able to embody these qualities that we hope that our children and students will grow up with. And we focused on two different aspects of these. So that's answering the third question, can happiness be learned? Again, happiness cannot be learned, but there are skills that are supporting happiness that can be learned. And there are two main ones. The first one is mindfulness, or awareness training. So, we are complaining our students are not listening, are not attentive, their attention span is very short. But there's no point shouting against them for that or scolding them, because attention is a competency and it can be trained. How long do I still have? 5 minutes. Okay, so let me do a 2-minute exercise with you, if you agree. So I would like to invite you to, just for a few minutes, sit upright in your chair, put your 2 feet on the floor so that you feel the floor. You might put your hands on your thigh or on wherever it's comfortable. If you want to, you can close your eyes. You don't have to, but if it's comfortable, you can close your eyes. Try to have your back upright. And let us bring our attention back to the body. We are so much caught in the head. Let's go back to our body. How do we feel right now in our body? Sensations, fresh or tired, tense or relaxed, whatever it is, just observing. Aware of the body, I'm aware of a breathing. When I breathe in, I know I'm breathing in. When I breathe out, I know I am breathing out. Aware of the body, aware of the breathing. I'm aware of the mind. Maybe there are many thoughts. Maybe it's agitated. Maybe it's quiet and peaceful. I'm not judging it, I'm simply observing it. And if I notice that my attention is wandering, I simply gently bring it back to the awareness of the body and of the breathing. Thank you. And so mindfulness is one point, one aspect, and the other one is social emotional learning. And I won't go into that because it has been spoken about yesterday, but obviously these are the two fundamental building blocks of happiness skills. And together they create the foundation both for teachers and students. So these are just, these are students in public school in Vietnam, primary school. So you see Vietnam is still a communist country, so they have the little red, and this is a secondary school in Germany. And in all the schools we have introduced mindfulness practices, emotional sharing, so that before starting the lesson, the students can share how they feel, you know, and have a moment of coming back to themselves. And it has had amazing effects. I don't read all that, but just as an example, the Harvard Medical School has created 2 years ago the so-called Thich Nhat Hanh Institute for Mindfulness in Public Health. So there's a whole institute that is just studying the effect of mindfulness in public health, including for children and young people. So I will not go into social emotional learning, my time is off. Just a few sentences about the Happy School program. So out of all this, we developed a program, which is a teacher training program, because we feel it's not up to us to tell the teachers what to do. They know best what to do, but the teachers have to embody it. So it's a one-year program. We did it in many, many schools, first in presence, and now we do it also online. We have over 30 countries participating. Italy, not yet. Maybe that's the next step. And again, it's based on these three dimensions: care for self, care for others, and care for the planet. And we've had a lot of research to assess the effectiveness, and the results are very positive. So that's really the practical implementation of what I was trying to share, that it is now implemented in many schools. And I think with the OECD PISA Happy Life dashboard that measures the well-being of students, then the question is, so what do we do about it if we see the well-being is not good? And Happy Schools is one of the possible answers. So to end, that was a big conference we had last year in Bhutan. Andreas Schleicher, amongst others, was there. That's the current Prime Minister of Bhutan opening this about. There's a global movement. You know, there's what we see on the surface, what we will hear in the media, which is like lots of bad news and terrible things happening in the world, but there's a lot of good things happening in the world. And we really need to create islands of sanity, islands of wisdom, islands of compassion, islands of kindness. And a place like this one can be such an island. And when you go back in your schools and classrooms, you will be the ambassadors of gratitude and kindness and compassion and wisdom. But we need to create a mycelium that underneath that creates a network that connects all of us so that we feel we're not alone in our classroom. We are part of a global movement that truly wants to make this planet a better place for our children and their children.